Have you ever witnessed a moment so unexpected that it completely flipped the way people saw someone forever? Well, what I'm about to tell you is one of those stories, and I guarantee you'll be hooked from the very first detail. A millionaire, proud of his intellect and social standing, once decided to invite the young son of his maid to play chess with him, purely as a joke. He thought it would be amusing to watch the boy fumble with the pieces, maybe make a few childish moves, and then lose within minutes. But what happened next didn't just shock the millionaire, it stunned an entire crowd that had gathered to watch. Before I reveal exactly how the boy's genius move changed everything, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, because stories like this will keep you inspired and glued to the screen. Now, picture this. The millionaire was hosting a lavish party in his mansion, chandeliers glittering above, laughter echoing across the marble hallways, expensive suits and elegant gowns brushing against the polished floor. Everyone there knew the millionaire loved two things more than anything, his wealth and his passion for chess. To him, chess wasn't just a game, it was a measure of intellect, of superiority, a way to prove he was always the smartest person in the room. And so, when his eyes fell upon the quiet maid's son standing near the staircase, holding a tray of drinks nervously for his mother, the idea hit him like a spark of arrogance. He smirked, called the boy over, and asked in front of everyone, "How about you play me a game? Let's see if you even know how the pieces move." His friends and guests chuckled, some whispering about how entertaining it would be to see the boy embarrassed. The maid's face turned pale. She wanted to refuse, but before she could say anything, her son nodded politely, set down the tray, and walked toward the grand chessboard in the center of the room. What nobody realized at that moment was that this simple decision would lead to one of the most jaw-dropping games of chess anyone in that mansion had ever witnessed. The boy sat down opposite the millionaire, his small hands brushing against the polished wooden pieces as though he'd handled them countless times before. The millionaire leaned back with a smug grin, enjoying the spotlight as guests circled around, eager to see the spectacle. "I'll give you the first move," he said condescendingly, his voice carrying the weight of arrogance. Everyone laughed, expecting the boy to clumsily move a pawn forward and seal his defeat in less than 10 turns. But to their surprise, the boy's eyes scanned the board with sharp precision, his lips pressed into a thin line of focus. He didn't rush, didn't fumble, he simply picked up a knight and placed it down with calculated confidence. The millionaire raised an eyebrow, a little amused, but thought nothing of it. What could a maid's son possibly know about the strategies of chess? Yet as the game progressed, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The boy countered every move with uncanny precision, blocking attacks, setting traps, and forcing the millionaire to retreat his pieces instead of advancing. The chuckles of the audience turned into murmurs, and the murmurs into stunned silence. Guests leaned closer, their drinks forgotten, their curiosity growing with every click of the wooden pieces against the board. The maid, who had been wringing her hands nervously at the edge of the room, looked on with wide eyes as she saw her son calmly outsmarting a man who prided himself as an intellectual giant. The millionaire's smile began to falter, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He adjusted his tie, shifted in his chair, and tried to reassert control over the game, but it was becoming obvious to everyone that the balance of power on the board was slipping away from him. The boy wasn't just playing. He was orchestrating a masterpiece, moving with the confidence of someone who had studied the art of chess far beyond what anyone imagined. By the midpoint of the game, the millionaire realized he was no longer in control. His queen, which he had relied on for dominance, was suddenly trapped between two pawns in a clever pincer move the boy had set up several turns ago. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the millionaire tried desperately to free his piece, but each move only tightened the noose. It was clear to the onlookers that the boy wasn't improvising, he had anticipated this exact scenario long before the millionaire even noticed the danger. The boy's calm demeanor only made the contrast sharper. While the millionaire fumbled and sighed, his brow furrowed in frustration, the boy remained steady, occasionally glancing up with a faint spark in his eyes that spoke of quiet confidence. Some of the guests began whispering among themselves, recalling stories they had heard of child prodigies who could memorize entire boards or defeat masters in blindfolded games. Could this boy be one of them? Could a maid's son secretly be a chess genius? The maid herself stood frozen, torn between pride and fear. She had always known her son was gifted, watching him spend hours studying borrowed chess books, scribbling strategies on scraps of paper, and practicing alone with a makeshift board at home. But never had she imagined he would display his skills here, in front of the very people who looked down on them. And now, as her son cornered the millionaire's rook with a flawless combination, the whispers turned into open admiration. Some clapped quietly, others smiled in disbelief, and the millionaire's face turned red with humiliation. For the first time in years, he realized he was being outmatched, not by a fellow millionaire, not by a grandmaster, but by the son of his maid, a boy he had thought of as beneath him. The tension in the room grew heavier with each passing move. Guests leaned in so close they could hear the millionaire's uneven breathing and the boy's steady exhale as he placed his pieces. The chandelier lights glinted off the polished board, casting sharp shadows that seemed to mirror the battle unfolding. The millionaire tried one last desperate strategy, sacrificing his bishop in hopes of luring the boy into a mistake. But once again, the boy saw through it instantly, countering with a move so brilliant that even those unfamiliar with chess could see its genius. He shifted his knight into position, forcing the millionaire's king into a corner. The room fell silent as the millionaire stared at the board, realizing he was only a few moves away from an inevitable checkmate. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his remaining pieces, but every possible move led to a dead end. This can't be happening," he muttered under his breath, though everyone heard it. The boy, however, remained silent, his eyes fixed on the board, unbothered by the weight of so many watching eyes. It was as if he had entered his own world, one where logic, strategy, and foresight ruled supreme. With each click of the pieces, he constructed a cage around the millionaire's king, until finally, with a soft but decisive tone, he whispered, "Checkmate." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted from the crowd, followed by a stunned silence. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, his face pale, his arrogance shattered. He had been defeated, not just defeated, but dismantled, by the very boy he had intended to humiliate. The aftermath of that checkmate was a scene no one at the mansion would ever forget. The millionaire sat in disbelief, unable to meet the eyes of his guests, while the boy quietly stood, his demeanor unchanged, as though winning was just another ordinary part of his day. The maid rushed forward, tears in her eyes, both terrified of her employer's reaction and overwhelmingly proud of her son. But instead of anger, what followed was something completely unexpected. The guests began clapping, first softly, then louder, until the room filled with applause. People who had moments ago chuckled at the boy's expense were now cheering for him, praising his brilliance, calling him a prodigy, a genius. The millionaire, cornered by both humiliation and admiration from his peers, forced a smile, though it was thin and trembling. He muttered something about being out of practice, but everyone knew the truth, he had been bested fair and square. The boy looked at his mother, who hugged him tightly, whispering words of pride. And in that moment, something shifted in the power dynamics of the room. The maid, who had always been invisible, reduced to silence and servitude, suddenly stood taller. Her son had given her a gift no wealth could buy, the gift of dignity and respect. From that day forward, the story spread beyond the mansion. People talked about the boy who outplayed a millionaire, who turned a cruel joke into a moment of triumph. Strangers wanted to meet him, schools offered scholarships, and opportunities began to open up that his mother had only dreamed of. What was meant to be a moment of mockery had become the defining turning point in their lives. And here's the lesson that will stay with you long after this story ends: never underestimate someone based on where they come from, what clothes they wear, or what job their parents do. Genius can be found in the most unexpected places, and dignity belongs to everyone, no matter their background. The millionaire learned that the hard way, humbled in front of his own peers. But for the boy and his mother, it was the beginning of a journey filled with new hope and new possibilities. The boy's genius, revealed by a single game of chess, became the spark that changed their destiny. And that, my friends, is why this story resonates so deeply, because it reminds us that every person carries untold potential, waiting for the right moment to shine. If you felt inspired, moved, or even a little surprised by this tale, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss stories like these, stories that show the extraordinary hidden inside the ordinary. Because sometimes, all it takes is one game, one decision, one genius move, to shock the world and change a life forever.